Calling to order the Communication Committee meeting from the town. Liam and Allison are here. John Anderson is here and Donnie Cushing is here. And we're ready to go. Item 3, public comment. Anybody out there?
No.
Nobody in here. Okay. Item 4, approval of minutes. Motion. So moved.
Second.
It's right.
Yeah. Yeah.
I forgot to. So, all in favor? Okay, staff updates. Discussion on the leader.
Yeah. So I hope, you know, we've been having a lot of conversations and giving a lot of thought to how we plan to fill this void left by the leader. I'm not sure we have any great answers. We have had some conversations with Karen Martin, who's also pursuing what partnerships might exist for existing periodicals. She's had conversations with the newspaper and Cape Elizabeth. We've reached out to, but haven't connected with the Gorham Weekly yet. And she's also reached out to a newspaper, I believe I want to say Wyndham.
Yeah, it was Wyndham.
And had some conversations about where there might be some opportunities. I think from a staff perspective, the concept of trying to stand up or produce the amount of content necessary for a newspaper would be a lift. But one conversation we've also had around an existing periodical is we actually met this morning with Kate
Riley.
Yeah, who's the editor of the Scarborough Living magazine. She, and again, I hope I'm not spoiling or worrying her, she does have plans to move that to a bi-monthly periodical. Right now it's quarterly. And we asked her to give some thought to what a dedicated, 3 or 4 page spread would look like in that, where it'd be exclusively town content and whether a partnership exists there. In the interim, and again, I think we made this known last meeting. We're trying to boost our promotion of kind of the existing channels we have as an interim step. Again, we ran 2 successive ads in the leader with their last few runs to promote our town e-newsletter. We will be taking out some ad space in the Scarborough Living magazine to promote that. And then we've also kind of talked internally about doing some direct mailing to the community. I think that again the challenge there is just the cost. Even sending a postcard to every home in Scarborough is about $5,000, which is really expensive in our world. But one of the things I think we're looking to convey is, between the town e-newsletter, Scarborough Living, which again I know is a lot of sort of soft content, but it is something that I think is generally pretty well consumed and well reviewed, and again is Scarborough based. And then also I think that there's some work to be done around informing our residents that the leader still exists. It's digital. It's still free and it's still out there and they're still producing content. And so we've kind of discussed internally whether we could do a coordinated campaign for people to understand where they can get their information for the town of Scarborough between those 3 things. So I think a lot of conversations are underway. I think the interim steps are to promote our e-newsletter and our other existing resources while we explore some long-term options. But we do have some, again, we want to learn more about what the model looks like for a newspaper there. We don't have anything to present to you. I think in the interim, we probably will look to further bolster maybe the budget for our public engagement and communications resources. Currently we have 2,500 a year. We're proposing to increase that to 7,500 next year. I think that probably needs to be far more robust. So those are kind of the things we've been working on and discussing with Karen Martin and Kate from Scarborough Living about what we can do to improve that. I know that Allison was part of a conversation today, and I'll let you hear Allison in a second. But again, going back to the void left by the leader, the SBAC is wondering how to reach residents to build some awareness to it.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Okay.
I have some thoughts. But
Okay. Yeah. I mean, Liam said everything of we're in this exploratory phase right now. What can we do most immediately? And it's encouraging people to sign up for our newsletter. We don't want there to be a gap or a loss of information that already exists somewhere and people aren't reaching it. Another discussion we've had, and just the question is, without the leader, what is that void that we're trying to fill? What is being lost aside from it being print? And one is the older demographic of residents who are only receiving their information that way.
It's 40% of the town.
But Karen provided some good insight of they might have digital access. There's some information in the census or whatever other data she has that they're not without the digital access. It's just a matter of getting them to that point of being signed up for it. Alternatively, another demographic is people who are more of the passive consumer of town news. The information is available if you're going to seek it, but if you're not going to seek it, what are some ways that you can find it with just like going about your day? So we kind of took that approach to seeing, are we needing to fill the void of the leader through print in a mailbox? Is that really how to catch people, or what is this barrier that we're trying to address? And so that's kind of what prompted some of these other discussions. And yeah, as Liam said,
95%, supposedly the graphic that Karen produced, I think it was 94% of Scarborough's population has internet access.
Absolutely. I don't
Yeah.
doubt that
Yeah.
for a minute. The issue with the leader is that the leader just waited until they ran out of money instead of promoting a transitional strategy. Transitional strategy basically creates some value add to going the next step, which is to looking up the URL, downloading an app, or doing something different with the idea that whether they know it or not, whether your customers know it or not, you know that this is not a sustainable model.
yeah,
That's one problem with the leader. And before they run out of business, and I think from intents and purposes they are business. I just don't see, if I'm an advertiser, am I going to want to put money into that publication when I don't know how many views they get, but I don't even think it's worth it. And my view, and I think you and I had this conversation at one point, saying, before the leader went out, maybe we should do what we might be forced to do anyway. And so within that framework, since I had a couple of hours, which my choice was to go drill out some parts or sit in a comfortable chair and learn something about our conversation today. So I chose to do that. And so, roughly, you can have a vision that, first of all, the leader didn't really cover local news. I mean, Drew sat there and, on his TV, he looked at a council meeting, he wrote it another once in a while. But that's entirely different than a paper that is interested in school sports, that wants to know about what the Little League is doing, that publishes obituaries routinely, those kinds of things. That's a real newspaper.
Can I just interrupt you real quick? It really did. I feel like the past year, because they were pulling in more Portland articles. Like,
yeah,
Yeah,
that Portland, Cape.
yeah.
And the
Yeah,
forecaster,
and-
there's a lot
and-
of sports stuff.
Yeah, and there's no local editorial control. It basically is an advertising flyer that adds just enough value to
Yeah,
justify the Hannaford flyer. So
Which I'm still getting.
I say,
Yeah,
that's not what I'm
still
saying.
get, yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So my research, if you were going to do this, you would develop a 3-year transitional strategy. You would take the town in this budget period, and that's important in this budget period. We seed a lot of stuff. We put money in, and the town would say that the total cost to make this thing, to make a real go of it, would be about $500,000. And to do that, what the town could do is say, we are going to put up seed capital of $250,000, number one. And unless we get a minimum of matching funds raised in the community of 200, we're not gonna put out a, so we'll go to 250, but you really need to meet a $200,000 private threshold of capital to get that. Then on the private side raise, you have businesses who make two forms of commitment together. One is that they commit to a cash contribution for working capital, and the second thing they do is commit to an annual ad buy. And the ad buy is consistent with the size of the business. So, you know, it's typical gold, silver, platinum, whatever. Then you get contributions from other potential big users, the not-for-profits. I guess you could call them in the business, but Maine Medical Center, Piper Shores, the Downs, and so forth. And you do that basically on the same piece. But what they get out of it is perhaps some editorial content that allows them to highlight some of their issues. That is a saleable product. Phase one, the money goes in a bank account. Phase two is you begin to look at staffing, and the staffing is a core, probably one journalism professional at probably about 80 grand, and maybe two other sort of 2 to 3 other entry levels, which are around all in probably 50 apiece. So there's your staffing piece. Then your editorial content comes from paid columnists. It comes from people who will volunteer and commit to cover a beat. So somebody could have the transportation committee, somebody could have the finance committee, and so forth. And then you get content from your neighborhood associations. You publish 26 times a year, not every week. And you use Gorham's model, which is instead of that the paper is readily available in the supermarket, you can walk in and pick it up, and that's free. But if you want it in your mailbox, it's $2, it's $50 a year. Either way. So there is subscription revenue and your printing costs, but no mailing costs. That model then can get extended to now you have this professional person who might also be charged with teaching a real journalism course in the high school and developing a journalism program there for the kids to cover the sports and that sort of thing. It starts to become a community deal. The board is this lovely communication committee and has, so instead of having to go back to the full council and so forth, the operating function of this committee would be to actually oversee the grant, you know, the distribution of the grant, all of that stuff, all the way through its operational piece. So what the council would do is put in the money and charge the committee with the implementation. And then somehow we would have to get somebody to go up there and sell this to people. And I looked at it, I thought for a minute, yeah, you could do that, Tom. And then I thought for a minute, you wouldn't do it for free. I do it on a contingency basis for 10% of what I raised. But the reason that I wouldn't do it for free, nobody should do it for free, is that it's real work. It's a real position, and it shouldn't stay around. But it's, you have to have somebody who has the ability to walk in to the C-suite of a Hannaford Brothers and make a credible case for what you're talking about, because they only have one objective in mind, that is, they're not trying to do it to, if they want to sell avocados, they can still get them.
Yeah.
So that's roughed out. It would probably take 3 months in the, from go, it would probably take, you'd know in 3 months whether or not you could raise the cash. And you'd have another 3 to 6 months of building out the core, then you'd probably be operational 9 to 12. That's the rough. So my belief is that if you take a business as usual approach, then what you get is a few more subscriptions to the newsletter, in which what you're getting is purely the town's perspective, not even the council's perspective. It's basically getting, you write something that Tom doesn't like, I'm sure you'll hear about it. And I don't mean that as a criticism. I just mean if you were doing it for me, right, and I saw something that didn't fit within my editorial framework and consistent with what I thought I was trying to accomplish as the boss, I'd say, yeah, of course, but I think I would certainly point out to you, it's off this. So I'm not asking you to answer that. I'm just saying that's kind of the way the world works. And what this town needs is it needs somebody to do things like dig into this budget, for example. Somebody actually wanted to report on this budget and what's in it, what's not in it, and that sort of thing. That takes some real work, and it is a benefit to the town. So that's my pitch.
I think it's a good multi-year approach that definitely needs to be explored. I would be really interested in the next community survey, because we always ask like what their preferred method is, and it was the leader. I don't know if there's any way we can use that to help us inform, with the leader gone, like what would they like differently, what would be better to reach them. I mean, we're kind of all assuming, myself included, that paper is a necessary, like the paper in the mail is like a necessary thing, and I think for some people it is. But to the point that you made, Allison, about like, do we know like the segments of our community who are actually reliant on that? And
Right.
like, is there, maybe it's not the full scale thing, what you said, near term, maybe near term, there is like a targeted mailer that we send to certain demographics that we feel like would benefit from something in the mail. So it's not the 5,000 for every household, it's the 2,500 for the senior households that
Right.
we want to reach. I'm curious to understand, because like the newsletter is awesome, but it's long. And
It
so
is long.
if we could, that be like a weekly thing versus a bi-weekly thing that just kind of gets it more in front of people on a more frequent basis, so they are incented to read it more frequently? Or is that,
Yeah, I think we're overdue for asking people for some feedback on the newsletter too, because we could make some changes in that sense too, because I agree it is long, and part of that too is because to have everything front and center.
Yeah.
Instead of like just a little blurb that you have to like go click for more information. And to your point of it being every 2 weeks, when there is definitely enough to fill it out every week. But yeah, just speculation at this point, but I do feel like it would be helpful to get some more insight from people on how they read the newsletter, and if they're reading it the full way through, or if it's just like a quick skimming at the top.
yeah, I still have the issue of when I open it on my computer, I always have to remember to click the expand more, but when I open it on
Yeah, I
my phone,
know.
it's mobile friendly, but like, so again, you might not scroll
Yeah,
all the way
on
through, but-
Gmail, like you have to
Yeah.
click into a new tab.
But that's where I think there's enough content that even if it was to be like weekly in terms of release, but I'm sure it's the same
Yeah.
process for you to create the content, I'm guessing, or for people to create the content, that again, the frequency might help with viewership or readership.
Yeah.
I wonder.
I mean, I had the same questions for the leader too, like it is a loss for the community, but how many people were reading it, and versus how much was it just going in the recycling bin, because it wasn't targeting a specific group of people. And we talked about that with Kate today. She said when people pick up the magazine, they're making the choice to pick that up as opposed to it just coming there and they don't know.
Yeah.
So she knows that if someone's picking it up, they're reading it. Something Liam and I talked about too was with the newsletter being only email, is there a way to mail it to people who request that it's mailed to them, so that way we're not mailing it to everybody, but we're mailing it to people who
Opt in.
would prefer that method.
The Gorham paper, believe it or not, budget for that paper is $85,000 even, and they break even.
Mhm.
And their circulation model is they print it and they put it in, in the bins with all
Yeah.
the other stuff. And
So it's not door to door
Okay.
delivery.
just basically, yeah, and
Yeah.
if you want a subscription to it, that's actually when I was doing my research, I was saying, yeah, okay, well, that makes sense, because if I don't, if I want it, I can pick it up, it's there, it's available. It's on the same notion as the old newsstands where you walk by them, you've seen them in the movies, where there's a stack of New York Times out there, and there's a big headline at the top. And it's designed so that people want to pick up and at least read the lead story. So that was an aha for me. And that the other is that I'm looking at their digital thing here. When you say that's what their digital paper looks like.
Yeah.
And you don't have to go onto an app where you start out with instructions on how to click through. And the thing has multiple pages. It's really well done. And their editorial staff, I think, consistent. There's a lot of volunteers, but their total staff cost for most of their cost is staff. I think it's around 70,000.
I mean, just to be practical, like I feel like what you guys are suggesting in terms of like a coordinated campaign to remind people that there is a digital,
Yeah, avenues for how to get
Yeah.
town
Yeah.
content.
I think that's needed. What would that cost to do something like that? Is that for the 7,500 you've estimated in your budget? Like, what have you had the opportunity yet to think a little bit more about like what you think the costs need to be? Is it double that for next year?
I think that if we doubled the salary, I think we had 15,000, I think we would find very defensible ways to use that. Or some direct outreach to homes on a limited basis, to fund a relationship with existing periodicals, to explore some other avenues. I mean, I think that, I think we would.
Yeah. And I would think too, like, I'm just thinking of the school coming up and anything that's important, like going old school sometimes, I think we all want to go digital because that's like modern, but like nothing is better in my opinion sometimes than just like seeing a sign or seeing like, I know the school had mentioned they were pretty successful with their foldable signs that they made,
Mhm.
where they just kind of place them around town.
Those sandwich boards.
Yeah,
Yeah.
so I don't know if we need stuff like that as part of this campaign where it's like signs out
Yeah.
around town where it's like, get your news, enroll in the leader or get the digital thing. And maybe to your point, I think one of the biggest disappointments in this whole situation was the lack of foresight and planning. And I'm sure it was a business decision that happened like that, but like we could have done this in advance of the leader going away. That would have allowed us time to let people
And in
transition.
fact, it would have even been possible within the context of the things I was saying previously to basically augment and supplement it. And that I think it really is a question of objective. One objective is we just want a way to tell the town what the transportation committee did last week from our point of view. Okay, we want a way to say, is the election, this is when the town council, blah, blah, blah. Those are just basic, pretty vanilla informational items. And none of that gets at a tool for community building and for engagement, which to me is the larger thing. And I don't think that the town itself can do that. I think that's been one of the great functions of independent news in small towns, is that it has been a place you can go to routinely find out if one of your neighbors is dead, or, you know, and the like. And I believe in the long term that we're all going to be getting our news on tablets and pads and so on and so forth. But without some kind of transitional strategy, that isn't going to happen. And if you do it from a purely for-profit standpoint, the for-profit model is I just want clicks and eyeballs.
Yeah.
You know, and we've seen plenty of evidence in the stuff that we get fed every day that it really is designed to do nothing more than that. So, I mean, I think that's a choice for the town as to whether or not, let's say it a different way. It's a classic, what is the role of government question? And that in general, government ought to be doing things that would not otherwise occur on their own in the private sector. And the private sector can no longer sustain by itself a model of independent community news. And so the question then is, does government, not necessarily this one, but in general, benefit from having a third estate locally? If you look at where we're at nationally right now, the only thing that's holding us together is independent journalists who are still willing to tell the truth. And our politicians certainly are running from it, and for good reason. So again, I can't answer that question, but I did. I know these are recorded. I'm going to put down a marker that basically says, look, it is a choice for the town. There is a pathway, but it requires a bigger leap. And my argument would be that the need for that type of communication locally in the next 6 months will become urgent. And I don't talk a lot about all this stuff, but I read a lot about it, and my personal opinion is that we're in deeper trouble than any of our politicians realize, and that the notion that we're just going to be able to sit back here in Scotland and pretend it's not happening will maybe be true for a little while longer. So, and I'm not telling, you know, this is my last communication with you, and as you know, totally listening to the transportation people talk about buses. One rocket man had the right idea. I mean, he was out there, but at least he was thinking, you know, bigger. So that's all. So I don't know, we can put a pin on this if you want.
I would just encourage you guys to make sure to come by May 1st and the budget, and maybe we talk about this a little bit in the next meeting, Don, that like 7,500. It's not 250,000, but I don't know if that would fly right away. But what is really needed to like?
I think one other thing well, it's on my mind, you know, in the budget next year, to Allison's point, we have another community survey, which again, we've been good about trying to repoll every 2 years. I think that we should be asking questions around delivery of news and information. And see and put some testing questions out there about what people would support.
Yeah.
You know, to better understand and inform what those next steps might be.
Yeah.
But surviving the transition and in the interim, and making sure that people understand what those remaining vehicles for information, even if it's from the town perspective or you know, more soft pieces. I think it's important that they know that. One other thing I just want to say before, we will also explore opportunities to partner with with the library and community services about building awareness with their kind of constituencies about the leader still exists.
Yeah,
You just have to go here to find it, and again, really put a plug in for the county newsletter so people stay engaged
Yeah.
through the transition.
one thing that I think will be interesting, because this is partly to Don's point, like. The leader was like at least an objective source of reporting. I know with the Marshview stuff, I'm not on social media as much, but I've heard a lot of people are putting information out there about the Marshview project.
Mhm.
And, some of it's factual, but it's slanted to like what they support. And so all of that's out there happening in the social media right now. Yet there's no source that's like reporting on what's happening at the planning board next week. And so people are only getting their information from their echo chambers online.
Mhm.
And that's very dangerous, because that's where I think some of the stuff happens that you're referring to, where it can really it's easy to create a misinformation campaign online.
Is this the Scarborough Moms?
Well, I heard it was on multiple,
Yeah.
so like,
I almost
Somebody mentioned to me-
responded, instead of spending your time kicking some ass, why don't you come on down in the public room?
Yeah. well, I think that's the hard part, is like that's a good example of a story building, turning into a plane, that as it comes to us, it may be so like built at that point that it really makes it hard for the town and the council to move something forward, because we've lost the narrative, because it's been completely controlled.
Already
Yeah.
developed.
Yeah.
It really is interesting. I think a challenge for this council, future councils, is going to be to live in that environment and give me out there, but to have the courage to ignore it. And basically,
Yeah.
and to basically say, I don't know who these folks are. I don't know whether they're real moms or whether they're bots. I don't know anything about them. What I know is that when somebody takes the time to write me an email with a Scarborough address, that I'm going to pay attention to. I know if somebody shows up at the podium, I'm going to pay attention to them. I know that if someone calls me, I'm going to pay attention to them. And so I think that the democracy requires a level of activity as opposed to just sit in that book. I do.
Yeah.
I did you read any of it?
Not yet.
Yeah. Well, you'll see that each generation has various hallmarks,
Mhm.
and that I think that it's the Gen Xers now who are basically kind of, taking on this passivity. Their voting record rates are down. It's fascinating to just sort of look at the generational trends. And as I'm reading that was why I gave it to you, because the book is called The Fourth Turning. But what it points to, you can see a lot of this stuff rolling out in a micro way. It explains a lot of stuff that we sit here and go, oh, that's crazy. They do that because they belong to a segment or a seculum that's been the same since the Roman times.
Yeah. I think to your point, like there's a void that's created with the leader leaving, so people are going to go to their trusted sources. And I think what we're trying to do is to build the newsletter as the trusted source for certain news that you need of what's going on in town. I think it's good to push them to try and get the digital, but I think there is that segment of people who aren't going to go digitally no matter what we do, and like what is the solution for them and what does that cost. And that might be an interim step to get to then Don's point of like, I think it would be great, and I would love to see something like the Gorham Times here in Scarborough. I think that's going to be, a multi-year thing. I think the survey to kind of gauge appetite for that, I think would be a great way to say, the leader's gone. That used to be a big area for you, for residents, where are you getting your news now? Would you support the town as government filling in that gap to kind of spur some private entity for being willing to do this? Or some people might say, no, I'm fine as it is. And so I think it's good. It would be good to know that. Like, it would be good to know, is there support for this before we go too far? So I think it would be a valuable thing to do.
What do you think would happen if an organization like the Land Trust, not the Land Trust, but a private, not-for-profit organization came with a check in their hand and said, we'd like you to match this, we want to create a local newspaper?
I think that would be awesome. I think that would, in my opinion, I think that's the question, is it the chicken or the egg? I would prefer that to happen first, and then the town.
Well, it's
Match
interesting
something.
because it makes it easier for that to happen if the town recognizes the need in advance and offers contingent financing.
Yeah.
Because then what it says, it's it's very much like when you raise venture capital, that the deal is that you don't get to keep any of the venture money. You put this in your blue sky document that says, you give me 1,000, but unless I raise $1 million, you get your 1,000 back. Because your 1,000 isn't really worth anything to you or to me unless I raise the balance. And so that's kind of the concept behind it, is that if the thresholds aren't met, I think you could say, yeah, if the town doesn't go along, then you get your money back. I think you could do it. You could do it that way. But it would be easier. And to your point about being multi-year, I agree with you. But I do think that you could envision a first edition year from now, which, because there are probably people living in that digital world on the community side who jump ship and come over the jump start. So I don't know. I just thought I would throw it out there for food for thought. Okay, put a pin in that. Did anyone come to? I noticed I didn't get a call last night.
We actually did have 4 people come, but partially because I pulled them from the other meeting that I went to. Because there was the Route 1, and I was like, I'm gonna come to the budget roundtable next, and they were like,
sure.
Dennis came, who spoke last night about the
lights.
and Stonis came. And so did Richard, more just to hear, they both were like, we haven't heard anything, they haven't read anything, so they just were interested to learn about the budget. So we talked a little bit about what was in it, where we were, and then Jen Ladd came. So again, not too much engagement. And again, I think it's been pretty quiet, other than Little League and pickleball, we haven't heard from many people. And I don't know, I'm not, to your point, I've given up on social media, so I don't go to that to really get a good sense of what people are saying. I know we have groups in town on social media who say things about budget and stuff, but I haven't looked at that to see if there's any comments or anything.
I know one of the more prominent organizations, I haven't seen a post on their social media regarding the budget. They have on the proposed development, but certainly the school, but I haven't seen any.
Well, I think the fear of the rebound is over. And I had my Wednesday town meeting. I had a little time for it afterwards. So I had my constituents. I actually found a guy, young guy who's probably mid-40s, who expressed an interest in running, not this time, but maybe in the fall. But I didn't get a lot of energy from the people that I was chatting with. 4 or 5 of them. Some of them pay a pretty big tax bill. And kind of
Yeah,
Mm.
I actually think it's interesting because I went to the senior luncheon last week and I was talking to a couple of people about the budget in the school, and repeatedly the question wasn't so much about the town and school budget this year as much as it was, how much is the school gonna cost me? Like whatever that is. So I think people are
Anticipating.
not looking at this budget as much as they're looking, what is that gonna do? Because I think they know what's gonna come from the town is like a incremental, absorbable, relatively absorbable increase. But this is gonna be like a stepwise increase that I think that's what people are actually a little bit more paying attention to.
Well, there's that, and I think there's another component to it, which is that I think people are sort of exhausted in general with the news of the day.
Yeah, that's fair. I think that's fair.
I know,
Yeah.
So, my suggestion would be at this point to do what the representatives are supposed to do, which is to deliver the most value for the least cost, to make responsible investments in the future, and to be diligent about getting rid of the kind of fluff or inefficiency. I think if you take that stand, then if somebody pays attention, then they'll see. I mean, that's what happened last time around. I think the last time around, we needed to be a lot more aggressive because of the general burden and the unknowns, and we did that job. And I think that people are happy. This year we have a little more breathing room, as long as we don't take advantage of it. I think people will get it.
Yeah.
So I'll just say for on the go.
Yeah.
Okay, so probably the biggest piece in that category, I heard somebody talking today about the value of the farm point neighborhood associations. And it feels to me like anything the town can do to encourage those groups, because they have, I think, the potential, well, going to a larger conversation, they have the potential to move towards more of a ward form representation when you have, and that, which would require charter change to get rid of the at-large. Not all of the at-large people, but to have a composition of the council which really did represent neighborhoods, particularly where neighborhoods are organized, and then enough at-large seats, I don't know what the number is, so that the individual areas wouldn't sort of dominate. But to me, that would be a much more balanced form of government. So,
There was some discussion in the last charter review committee about moving to a hybrid ward system, and there was a good amount of interest on that committee to look at, 4 ward seats and 3 at large.
when was the last constitutional convention?
2021, I want to say, 2020.
It was, Nick was on there, he chaired it, and then he was elected after that, so at least 3 years ago.
2022.
It
I'll
was
have
on
to
the
go back and
ballot.
look.
It was on
Were
the
there
ballot
changes made to the
2022.
charter, or was
Yeah.
it just a?
There were, one of them being the change to this BOE election in June. That was one of the ones. There was also some increases in thresholds.
Got a bigger stipend.
Got a pay increase.
Yeah.
But they were fairly minuscule. They're fairly minuscule.
So I think to Don's point, like, do we have a current list? I know you showed it last time, like, but I couldn't remember. We have the organizations.
Mhm.
Do we have a point of contact?
I do have a column for that. It's not filled out right now, but I started. I
I
have
think
a
that's
point of
like,
contact column.
as we talk about campaigns, coordinated campaigns, I think using that
Right. as a
structure
distribution list.
to help get it out. I know that's something that the school group is really interested in, being like, who are all the groups
Yeah,
that have reach? Who is a contact that they can reach out to? And again, I told them, I said, the best thing you can do is provide them something to share and say, do you mind
That's
distributing
exactly,
this?
I shared that with them today.
Okay,
and
cool.
That format of like creating a template that they can copy and paste either
Yeah.
to a social post or newsletter if they have one.
Yeah.
Make it
'cause-
really easy for them.
Yeah, I think getting their help too to promote e-news, digital stuff, like, I just think the more you hit people where they are, right?
Yep, and then they disseminate
Yeah.
stuff in like
You
a
know,
web.
another thing that you could consider doing is asking people if they would be interested in a text message push for certain stuff.
Mm.
I say that for the little rally, and my leftover list.
Mhm.
And, you know, I sat there in my chair and pressed the button and reloaded list. The app costs $14.95 a month. And I used it just for 1 month.
Yeah.
And I sent, you know, I stopped because I just felt like 1,500 people was enough. I could have gone to 2,000. But once you ask people and you have a valid cell phone number, then you have the ability to, on your phone, compose a text and press the button. And that text will go to every person who said they would like, so it could be emergency alerts, it could be notification of important meetings. You could, that would be a good thing to put, is would you be interested? And please check which of the following
Yeah.
you're willing to have text from.
So, you're just making me think, I wonder if there's an opportunity to talk to GPCog. Cause I'm assuming multiple communities are in the same boat, right? It wasn't just us that lost the leader, other communities.
So, number of
Yeah,
almost all the southern Maine communities, I mean,
yeah,
the Kennebunk Post, I mean, I think there's almost a dozen.
yeah. GPCog does have something like that where you can go online, subscribe. I get their texts when things happen for what I subscribed for. And so occasionally when I get it, I'll look at it because I tend to look at my texts more than I look at my email because
Yeah.
my email is just a bunch of
Right.
junk.
Bogged down.
Yeah, so I wonder if that's
Well-
something to explore with them to say, I wonder if they're hearing the same thing. Are they hearing from other communities that there's a gap in like, is this a,
GPCog or the,
Yeah.
yeah. Yeah, we could reach out.
or even just to learn like, what is their text platform? Like, how do they have that built? Cause it could be the same thing, Allison, of like, for the newsletter, it's like, it's not just email to you, you actually get a text message. So you can look at it on your phone if you want to open it from a text message.
The name of the app that I used, I believe is called Send the Pipe. Let me see.
We do have an emergency notification program called Code Red.
Right,
That we-
saw that.
That would be another opt-in platform. I get some sales emails from one. I think it's called like Text My Gov or something. I need to look at that.
I don't know if I deleted it or not, I can't, but I'm pretty sure that the name of it is Send a Hype. And it's pretty robust for an easy, you know, and you can upload an Excel spreadsheet to it. So that's so you could do that on the website and just promote that in the newsletter. Say, hey, we're trying to figure out ways. Would you be willing to do this? If so, which of the following things would you survey it right on the current newsletter? See what you get. Okay, we're moving out of time here. So I'm going to move on to discussion on the new chair. That really will be up to the broader council. But were it up to me, I would say take this opportunity because this, for all intents and purposes, the council portion of this committee is going to be out of one.
Yeah.
And what I would suggest is that that the council charge some folks with reassessing the role and responsibility of the communication committee. And maybe the way to do it would be to refer to rules and policy and have rules and policy, although that is in the same boat as communication in some senses, but to have a conversation about what in fact is the role and responsibility of this. Is it, to be a resource to you guys? Is it to hold you guys accountable to something? I don't think it is, because by town charter and contract, we rule out. So this is basically a nice chat. I'm not devaluing it, but it certainly has no formal authority and responsibility. But in terms of this committee having anything really to do with the council, that would be my suggestion. Council Corner themes and assignments, Allison, my suggestion to you would be that you follow that list and get somebody to write something for the newsletter.
Keep the rotation.
And let them write what they, what they feel like. And I have a list of future.
You do?
No.
Okay.
No, I've got a future agenda, but it has nothing to do,
Yeah.
nothing to do with this. But anyway, so in closing, before I ask for a motion adjourn, I want to say to both of you that me personally, it's been a pleasure. I know that I've pushed you a bit and you've responded well. I hope you've learned a thing or two. I have. And I just thank you for your good work, and of course, John, you and I will continue to converse, because I'll be sitting there in my chair and I'll think of something.
Can you recall?
I'm gonna call John.
John's opted
You know,
into
there
your
are
text.
6 other counselors.
I've got him in my speed dial
Yeah.
under DD.
Well, thanks, Don, and I'm really glad that we were able to put together that communications framework and guide. That's something I don't think we would have done last year without your insight and kind of spearheading that, so.
And the budget communications look really nice. I had obviously issues with the difference between metric and statistic, but that had nothing to do with with where it was. So, all right.
All right,
Off
so
we-
moved.
Oh,
Adjourn.
second, yeah, okay, adjourn.